This is the Post Shift Podcast, a raw look at the hospitality industry. Welcome, Post Shifters, and this is another episode of the Post Shift Podcast with your host, Shawn Soole. Obviously, that's me. This week I get to sit down with Josh Lindley, who is a old friend of mine. We met a few years ago at Little Jumbo, and we've stayed in contact. Last year I was at the inaugural Toronto Cocktail Conference, speaking. I did 2 seminars last year. This year I am the official podcaster for the Toronto Cocktail Conference, so I'm super excited about that. Really looking forward to it. This is 2.5 weeks away now, so I'm going to go to Toronto Cocktail Conference. Before I go off to Singapore, I'm going to be doing tons of interviews, tons of streaming. Keep an eye out for it. I'm really looking forward to it. There's some really epic gangster people coming to the Toronto Cocktail Conference this year, so really looking forward to it. And you go talk about the original OG, which is Josh and Jess, who are from Bartender Atlas, who have teamed up with Gordon John from the Drake, and they created this epic, wicked, amazing conference in Toronto, which is sort of the hub on the East Coast for Canada. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a great show. If you haven't got your tickets, go to the Toronto Cocktail Conference website, pick up your tickets. And if you're a bartender out there listening, hit up Bartender Atlas and submit a photo and the questionnaire so that you can be showcased. So whenever you go to a different city, you know who to go see. So hope you enjoyed the episode, guys. I really appreciate it, and have a good week. Bye.
What time is it there right now?
8 p.m.
You guys are really getting into the crunch now.
Yeah, it's coming up for sure.
What do we got? We got just less than 3 weeks.
3 weeks as of today.
So
until Toronto Cocktail Conference, yeah.
We're going to post this on Friday, so it'll be 2 and a bit weeks just before Toronto Cocktail Conference.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys have got a stellar lineup this year.
I'm really happy with everyone that we have coming this year for sure. Not that I was unhappy with anybody anyway, but the idea that we open it up and sort of accept submissions for seminars, really, that's really important to us when we're organizing the conference, because we want to make sure that what we're talking about and what people are talking about and what our attendees are hearing about are things that are concerns of, working bartenders or managers or, people who are particularly passionate about one part of the industry. Just making sure that it's definitely like people driven as opposed to, business driven, or, anyone doing these presentations isn't doing them because they feel like it's work so much, but doing them because they feel that they have something they want to share.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think you guys lent more into that this year than you did probably last year. It's just last year, the evolution of everything.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing is last year, it was the first year we were doing it. We wanted to, maybe stack the bill a little more, make sure there was people that we were familiar with or that we'd worked with before and knew could provide really high quality content. You did 2 different seminars last year. We trusted you. So it was nice this year to open it up a little more and see who's interested. And we did sort of tap some people on the shoulder and ask if they might be interested, but that didn't necessarily mean that they submitted anything, or that we, after the worst day of organizing Toronto Cocktail Conference, is going through seminar submissions and deciding what we're going to talk about and what sort of seminars we're going to provide. It's a process, and it takes a lot of coffee.
and what do you think as an industry right now? What do you think right now is the benchmark conversation pieces that you as a conference are trying to chase?
Well, a big thing that we definitely are leaning really hard on with the Toronto Cocktail Conference is maintaining open lines of communication between all facets of the industry, and making sure that if you're a bar owner and you have 5 different establishments and you train your staff in a certain way, we want to make sure that you can convey the way you do things to the 22-year-old that's just getting out of university and has decided that maybe what they went to school for is not for them and they're going to work in this industry instead. And really just making sure that the community aspect and everyone that shows up feels like they're welcome, and everyone that shows up feels like they can approach whoever is there. And really that's what we're trying to get across, is that everyone has their own specialties, and we want to make sure that everyone has access to everyone's specialties.
Mm-hmm. And what are the feature seminars? I know that you've got camper coming in, but I know just from my personal experience with tails and that sort of thing, sustainability, inclusiveness are all hot topics right now. And I know you guys have really doubled down on those for this year's seminars.
Well, definitely. I mean, Ashton Berry came last year. I met Ashton first like 5 years ago now. I think we were both at Camp Run Amok at the same time. And even then, and that was when she was focusing more on managing bars and making cocktails. And even then, I knew something special was going on with her. And of course, this year, her and Paul from Imbibe are presenting a seminar together, which is, I mean, if you had told me that the editor of Imbibe magazine was going to be speaking at a conference I was helping organize, it's something I think is amazing. We definitely are working on a couple sustainability things. More than that, I think this year we focused a lot on our practical aspects for seminars. We have a couple people talking about how to streamline your back bar, how to streamline your drink Ian Griffiths is doing a seminar about building rounds and the most effective way to do it. And then we have Tess Ann Sawyer, who had won Speed Rack Canada the first or second year that it happened. And she was in New York and routinely was involved in Speed Rack there too. So we have her talking about how to pump out drinks in a high volume establishment, in a high volume environment, really trying to help people expand on how they're making drinks and doing a lot more practical stuff this year, as well as, trying to keep some of the high-minded stuff in mind too.
Yeah, 'cause you got Camper English talking about he's been a champion right now for stop
work,
hurting people.
Yeah, his work on Cocktail Safe is just, the dedication that guy has when he takes on a project is just inspiring as hell. I bought his book a few years ago, the gin and tonic book. Like, who writes a book about one drink? It's amazing.
And just a classic highball.
Yeah, exactly. It's not.
It's like doing a whiskey soda book or a vodka tonic book.
Yeah,
or vodka soda.
would never.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's like no one would ever do that except for Camper, because he is that dedicated and so well researched in everything. And so we're really happy that we thought that with the launch of cocktailsafe.org, it would be a great thing to have him come and launch this. Another seminar that I'm really excited about, our friend Sam Jimenez, he's based out of Oakland. He owns a bar there called the Blind Tiger, I think. He maybe owns other places as well, but what he's talking about specifically is responsible tiki. Sam is of Polynesian and Mexican descent, and so he has a very specific take on how tiki is viewed and what it's used for and who sells it and why it's being sold a certain way. So having Sam come and do that talk, I'm really excited about to hear how that goes.
I'm actually looking forward to that one a lot. I saw that one. I was like, I really need to see that one. But the funny thing is like, while I was even in Singapore, I went to a bar and I had a drink which they made their own Kikona vermouth, and I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning with heart palpitations.
Oh wow!
So I woke up in the morning with heart palpitations, just like that couldn't have been it. And it was obviously that they have overdosed me on tonic, basically. And so I woke up at like 3-4 o'clock in the morning with like heart palpitations, and I like laid in bed trying to calm myself down.
That's scary, man.
Oh, it is, yeah. Especially when you're in a completely different country by yourself. But it's funny because everything that you just talked about with like being safer with ingredients and what Ian and Tessa are talking about. The thing is that I think as an industry, Zed said it perfectly the other day when I was talking to him. He said that there's a sort of vacuum that happens in this gap of age groups. So there's people our age, and then there's really young. And then in the middle, there's a spattering of people that have got that 10, 15-year-old experience, 10, 15 years worth of experience, but they've gone off to be brand ambassadors or something like that. So it creates this vacuum where the root of knowledge for most young bartenders these days is YouTube videos and whichever website gets the very first hit when it says how to make your own tonic water. And so I really am looking forward to this year's conference. But in speaking of this, we sort of missed the big chunks we talked about the conference. How about you introduce yourself? I'm going to obviously introduce yourself in my intro. But,
yeah. Okay.
How about you introduce yourself?
Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. A couple minutes in. That's fine.
Yeah.
So my name, I'm Josh Lindley. I have been bartending since about 2007. I started bar backing at the Drake Hotel in 2005. I was pretty long in the tooth to become a bar back. I was 25 before I got into the industry. Before that, I had many jobs. The notable ones were that I was an on-air radio announcer when I was 21 years old.
You have the voice for it.
Yeah, whiskey and my parents gave that to me. So I was on 102.1 The Edge here in Toronto. It's an alt-rock radio station when I was 21. I left there to go work on a record label and tour with bands for a while. After that, touring with bands in Canada is a lot of fun, and you get a lot of great stories out of it, but it's also a really good way to go broke. And I had a friend who was bar backing at the Drake Hotel at the time. They'd been open maybe 6 months at this point, and this friend of mine decided he didn't want to bar back anymore. He wanted to be a server, and whoever his manager was at the time told him that he needed to find a replacement, so he found me. And it feels pretty great the first night after bar backing, running up and down stairs, carrying buckets of ice and, cases of beer up and down 3 or 4 flights of stairs at the Drake Hotel. You leave with $60 in your pocket, and that's just because everyone knows you worked really hard, and I was never happier to get $60 so I could buy groceries. So I worked at the Drake Hotel for about 5 years. I left there, worked in some divey spots for a minute, and then I ran the cocktail program at a recently closed restaurant called Campagnolo here in Toronto. We were on the en route list and all that stuff, so did very well. Since leaving the Drake Hotel, I've done very well in the 50 to 70 seat restaurant scene here in Toronto, really the upscale casual capital of the world. So I was at Campagnolo for a long time, and then I worked at Bar Isabel when it had first opened as well. I wasn't really on the opening team, but once the place got open, I kind of got a call from Mike Webster, old friend of mine who was bar managing there, saying that he could really use an extra set of hands, which anyone that went to Bar Isabel in the first 2 years it was open would attest that it was a madhouse. I mean, it still is insanely busy there, but yeah, it was a madhouse for the first 2 years. And then I worked as the brand ambassador for Hendrick's Gin for Canada for almost a year, which was, again, like you were just saying, you get 8-10 years into making drinks and someone offers you a brand job. It's a reasonable leap to make. And it was amazing. The stuff that I learned working for Hendrick's Gin was awesome. The people that I met, it's amazing. It really, I keep joking that as a bartender of 8 or 9 years, you're like, yeah, I know what a brand ambassador does. And then you take that job and all of a sudden you're like, I know about 20% of what a brand ambassador does.
Yeah.
And you learn pretty quickly everything that's going on. So yeah, after about a year of working as a brand ambassador, just under a year, I left that job, and then I went and worked at the Harvard Room for the last 8 or 9 months that it was open. And that's the very Coles Notes version of my resume. I'm currently working at a spot called Chanticleer in Toronto, little 30-seat French-inspired bistro-style restaurant. Really well thought out wine list, a lot of organic and biodynamic and natural wines there. It opened in 2012, and the owner, Jacob, has just been kind of ahead of the game on a lot of things. So yeah, working there now a few nights a week still. Then I run Bartender Atlas with my wife and partner and everything, Jessica Blaine Smith. So her and I make up half of the team that organizes the Toronto Cocktail Conference. See, I circled around well. It's like I was trained how to speak, how to tell stories, right?
Bartender
go
Atlas
ahead.
Bartender Atlas is a passion project for you. Like, what inspired you and Jess to start Bartender Atlas?
Yeah, so after working with Hendrick's Gin, like I was saying, you sort of get a deeper perspective on everything that goes into making cocktails and how brands work and how bars work. And Jess and I both, Jess especially, has been bitten by the travel bug since she was very young. And so we travel a lot. And of course, if we're going to cities we've never been to before, given my passion specifically, we would look up where, top bars in Melbourne, top bars in Sydney, top bars in Mexico City, all this stuff, and the world's top 50 list. that I've been reading for a million years and hearing stories about all these bars that you just absolutely need to go visit. And then we started realizing the real difference between the best bar and the worst bar is who's behind the bar. And there's tons of websites and lists and books about the best bar and the best cocktail and the best city to drink in, but there wasn't really anyone chronicling the people who were behind a bar for 8 or 12 hours a night, and really, really paying attention to the people that are making these experiences. And so we would have experiences like there's a story that's on our website. If you go to bartenderatlas.com and like click the about, you see these 8 paragraphs that I wrote about when we went to Eau de Vie in Sydney, which has routinely been on all those best of lists.
Yeah.
And it's funny, in the last 2 years, we've met a few people who were working the night that this happened, but Jess and I went in there, we're having a cocktail. The people behind the bar are just blowing my mind. You know, these women are throwing liquid nitrogen around, and you know, the bartender would start building a drink, set it up, start stirring, turn their back, and the server would come over, finish stirring, you know, garnish the drink and run it out to a table. And this was all happening in like 43 seconds. One of those moments where as a bartender, you're watching someone work and you think, wow, I suck. like I need to get so much better at this job. And we're watching this happen and talking with the bartender a little bit, and they're like, oh, you're in from Toronto. What are you doing tomorrow? And we said whatever the lame plans were that we were doing the next day. I can't remember what it was, but it was something kind of cheesy and touristy, whatever. And the bartender says, listen, you're not doing that. Here's the thing. And she pulls out a piece of receipt paper and writes down, you're getting on this bus. You're going to this beach. You're going to walk along the boardwalk from Bondi to Coogee. It'll take you about 2 hours. You're going to do the walk, and when you finish the walk, you're going to go to this place, and you're going to eat lunch there. And kind of tells us what to do the next day. And it was the best thing we did on that whole trip.
Wow.
And really from that point on, it really made the difference. And it's like, yeah, sure. So the bartenders at Eau de Vie are unbelievable drink makers, but beyond that, they actually care about the guests and want their guests to have the best time possible. And through starting Bartender Atlas, we really want those people to be featured on the website so that when people know, you know, general travelers, not just industry folk, although obviously, you know, that's the biggest part of our demographic right now. But ideally, we want it to be more of a travel website than anything else. Mm-hmm. So that if, you know, someone is going to whatever, you know, IBM conference in Des Moines, Iowa, and they want to go get a good cocktail from someone that's interested in cocktails or Star Wars or antique furniture, they can go sit at someone's bar in any city in the world and know that they're getting served by someone who cares.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's a wicked elevator pitch for anybody who's listening and wants to learn why Bartender Atlas needs to get more traffic.
That's what we're trying for, yeah.
So that led to being the half of the team that started up Toronto Cocktail Conference. And who's the other half of the team?
So the other half of the team is Gord Hanna, who back in 2005 when I started working at the Drake Hotel, I was Gord's barback. And he is still at the Drake Hotel. His title is now something I can't remember the name of, but basically he's in charge of what drinks are being made at all of the Drake Hotel's properties, of which there's 6 or 7 at this point. Mm-hmm. So he kind of goes around and works with all the young bartenders that are coming to work at any Drake property. Again, very much focused on making sure that the bartenders behind the bar are equipped to work in those establishments and make sure that the guest always has the best time. And then the other gentleman also works for the Drake Hotel. His name is John Humphreys. He is, again, has a title. He's more or less Gord's bar manager. And so the 4 of us decided a few years ago that between the Drake Hotel also is just like such a good establishment here in Toronto and has done so many great things community-wise. There's so many bartenders in Toronto that have worked at the Drake at some point that are now brand ambassadors or own their own bar or have written books. One specific bar manager that I used to have is now in charge of food and beverage for Cineplex Odeon Canada. And this is all stuff that comes from the attitude of working at the Drake Hotel. So yeah, Gordon, John, and Jess and I work diligently on Toronto Cocktail Conference for about 9.5 to 10 months of the year. And then the other 2 months, we're still texting each other about ideas anyway.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So how did it all come together? How did it sort of like, did you just wake up one day and go, hey, I want to do a cocktail conference for Toronto? Because Toronto is a massive city. And for anybody in Canada, like it's either Vancouver or Toronto, maybe Montreal as a close second, third position. But Toronto is sort of like the melting pot of the East, where it really makes sense for the cocktail bar and the cocktail culture that's existed there for so long to have its own conference. So how did it sort of evolve from a spark into this full-on, full-fledged sort of event?
Yeah, well, okay, so first of all, I want to say, as far as cities in Canada to get drinks, Halifax is on the come-up.
Really, big time.
Jess and I organized a few days of events in Halifax earlier this year with help from the community out there, obviously. And, man, there's amazing bars in Halifax. There's a pretty good Halifax contingent, I think, coming to Toronto Cocktail Conference this year. So anyway, besides that, why did we decide to do the conference? So John, especially at the Drake, had been, the Drake Hotel dedicates a lot of time and energy to hosting cocktail conferences, when brand ambassadors are in town, when different, cocktail book authors are in town. The Drake is oftentimes the first place that gets offered up to host any of these events, and it's a privilege that the Drake Hotel has. What with the space and so many different spaces in that building, they can be open for regular business and have another event happen, and it doesn't really get in the way or affect anything, which isn't the case in a lot of places in Toronto, because we're all, like I was saying, 50 to 70 seat restaurants, and if you're trying to run an event and then flip into service, it gets very hard. So the Drake Hotel has been very good with that. John's always been very supportive of bartender education. The folks from Lush Life, who organize Camp Run Amok and Portland Cocktail Week, and they did like a Bar Institute traveling tour for a while there too. They had organized a Toronto Bar Institute. This is 2017, I want to say. And they have run all these amazing events, and they were just having a hard time putting something together in Canada, because it's such a different market, especially Ontario. It's very difficult to run events here if you're from somewhere outside of Ontario. So we were working with them, and then they had organized a Bar Institute. At the last minute, it turned out they had some troubles and couldn't really run the event. They asked Jess and I to sort of take it on. They had organized with the Drake, and so we sort of took on Bar Institute Toronto. And then once that had happened, a couple weeks later, Jess and John and Gord and I all sat down and thought, well, if we can take this event that was put together by this other team, why don't we organize one for ourselves, like from jump? If we go from day one all the way through, how can we like, what things can we learn? What can we improve on? How can we actually make it happen over the course of 3 days? And so the drive is definitely there. People in Toronto are very interested in everything. It's, again, like I was saying, the turnout that we got last year was just outstanding. Between, like I was saying, people who have been maybe distilling somewhere close by or running their own restaurants and want to figure out new, better ways to train their staff. And then also 22-year-olds who just want to learn more about cocktails and aren't really sure where to start. And we try to cover all of that because there is so much going on in Toronto. But it's a big city. There's times where I won't cross the median of the city for months at a time. But still find myself busy in places to go out, and always new places opening, or a friend that has moved to a new bar and is trying something different at this new restaurant or whatever. So it's hard to get everywhere. So we're trying to create something central so that everyone can actually come and meet with each other and interact in a genuine way.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic, and I think you've been to Tales a couple of times and some other big, huge festivals. Sometimes it can be a lot of sensory overload. And just so much. And then, of course, like, regardless of how much we talk about, there is a certain level of drinking that's involved. And you go tasting room after tasting room after tasting room. I love the fact that the conference last year was sort of like a block of seminars, and then you go out and have lunch with a tasting room or a couple of different floors of tasting, and then that would shut down, and you go off and do your seminars, and then you go back and do it like mid-afternoon sort of thing. And I like the fact that it wasn't all brands and alcohol just getting pushed down your throat at all times.
Yeah, one thing that we definitely strive for, and I mean, there are seminars where it makes sense, but for the most part, a lot of times these seminars, you don't need a drink while you're talking about how to manage your staff, However, if you're talking about craft distilling in Ontario, it's probably pretty handy to have an example or two. or
Yeah.
like the history of rum on the East Coast, and you want to taste like rums from different styles. I mean, sometimes it does definitely make sense, but for the most part, we don't want people getting drunk in our seminars. We want people there to learn in the seminars, and there's tons of tasting stations and activations from some of our sponsors that keep it kind of light and fun as well. So it's not all just going to school. It's like on school, but at recess you get a fantastic blue margarita, which I would have gone to school way more often if that had been the case. The other thing is, like you were saying, we have it sort of structured that way so that no matter what, you're sort of seeing the same faces for those 3 days and really getting familiar with whoever else the other attendees are. That was a big part of why we structured it that way. We want everyone to see everyone, you know?
And I think I went out more in Toronto during the conference than I think I've ever gone out in Toronto, because it was you sort of blocked it all off, and then you'd go off and have dinner somewhere and have drinks another place, and you'd come back for a late night event, and you'd sort of always be sort of not necessarily being pushed out, but like also sort of like forcing yourself to go out and look at different venues around the town, instead of just being at one hotel or being at the Drake and sort of everything is going on there. Sort of everybody was like, okay, well, let's go off and do this for 2 hours, and we'll come back to that event. And really everybody in Toronto got helped out.
Yeah, all our seminar programming is done by 5 p.m. as well. So keeping in mind there's people from Toronto that are going to have to work those 3 days. So we're done by 5. You still have the opportunity to see 2 or 3 seminars in a day before you can take off and have to go to work. This year we have some late night programming happening with the conference, but also just the idea of if you're in town, just, take off. You've got the night off. You don't have to be at the Drake Hotel until midnight every night. I mean, there's no problem. If that's how you want to do your conference, I mean, it's the same with any conference, really. You can choose how you're going to do it. But yeah, we really want people to explore Toronto as well. When you're seeing those same faces everywhere, and someone says, they're obviously got to take off and work that night, find out where they work, go have dinner with them, that's something that we're working on too. Also, the mentoring sessions is something that Gord actually brought to the table when we were organizing it, that all of us are just really excited about.
And it's much bigger this year too, isn't it? There's more mentors, more slots.
We've put a little more dedicated time into it. So the idea behind the mentoring sessions, and this came from an event that Jess and I did, where when Jim Meehan's last book came out, we brought him up to Toronto, sold tickets, and with the ticket you got the book and a couple cocktails and a chance to sit down for 5 or 10 minutes with Jim Meehan while he signed your book, and you could ask him questions, he could ask you what you're up to, that kind of thing. And Gord was really inspired by that and thought about tying that into the conference. So we have all these speakers. Some are Toronto, some are from Vancouver, some are from New Orleans. We have Lucas Grolio is coming up from Argentina.
Oh, wow.
And these are people that you get a chance, if you sign up ahead of time, you can find out what drives these people, these industry lighthouses, as it were, guiding the industry around, and you can sit and ask them legitimate questions, and they'll answer you legitimately. And we make sure that all the mentors say ahead of time, like, we okay it by the speakers first. We don't just shove them into a room with some overeager kid, because that would be no fun for anybody, and no one gets anything out of that. But yeah, and it's a really cool program. I think it's a cool program. I know I would have appreciated it when I was coming up if I had 15 minutes to sit with someone and pick their brain.
110%.
Yeah.
So what's one thing you're looking forward to this year out of anything? I know it might be hard to pick, but what's the one thing that you're like, ooh, giddy like a schoolgirl about?
Wow. There's a few things going on. I know. Wow. Okay. So there is a venue at the Drake that is, it's a private room. They usually do just private parties in there. It's called Room 222. It's named after a room at the Chelsea Hotel where several important albums and books have been written in the last, 100 years. But in Room 222, several brands have sort of booked it out, and I don't want to spoil any surprises about what those brands have decided they're doing, but it's a very interactive and hands-on thing, so that not only are you sitting there learning all day by taking notes in a book, because I know everyone learns different ways, but some of the things that some of our sponsors, some of our brands have planned for this are really hands-on and interactive, and you really get into the learning experience rather than just sitting and taking notes. And I'm pretty excited about that, because I know, like I never liked school when I was a kid, and even years of going to Tales or Tales on Tour or Thirst in Boston or any other cocktail week, I know a lot of times when I sit down with a notebook in front of me, it's almost like a drilled into me response to just instantly be bored. Even if it's I've got 9 rum samples in front of me from countries I'm never going to visit, I still just sit there and I'm like, oh, I'm sitting taking notes. And just like, it's definitely like a formula that doesn't work as well for me, but I'm happy to provide it for other people. And so the more interactive and the more entertaining teachers are, the more excited I get about it.
Do you find this year especially, because I know that in Canada the hard thing is getting brand backing, like it's a double-edged sword. Like I find in the US when you do Tales and stuff, it's just so much money, so much branding, so much everything. But in Canada, that's always been very restricted. We just don't have the budgets up here, it's plain and simple. Do you find this year with the success of last year that brands have started coming on board a little bit more and like hit you up and gone, really loved what you did last year, we want to sign up early for you?
Yeah, I think we're very fortunate. The 4 of us have worked. Canada is small, despite the fact that it's the second biggest country on the planet or whatever we are right now. I don't know where borders are drawn in Russia anymore, which is another separate podcast. But Canada, despite being so geographically huge, we all know each other. It's, oh, hey, I got a friend from St. John's. Do you know Brendan? Yep, I know Brendan from St. John's. That happens. Anyway, having brands get involved it's I wouldn't go so far as to say it's easier because we had these relationships with most brands or most distributors in Canada leading into last year's as well. We've all worked together for a long time. The Drake Hotel has, like I was saying, they host so many things at the Drake Hotel that so many brand people are just excited to work with us when we're doing things. I feel like with Bartender Atlas as well, of course, everyone thinks they're doing a good job until you get fired, right? So we've done so many events with Bartender Atlas as well, where brands are just happy to work with us. We get good engagement generally when we do events, and so I think that when we approach people about doing Toronto Cocktail Conference, brands generally, obviously everyone has questions, everyone wants to make sure they're represented properly, but everyone has also been very excited to work with it and have been pretty pumped about people in Toronto organizing a cocktail conference like this. So it's been shockingly easy working with the brands on Toronto Cocktail Conference. It's really great. Everyone's very supportive. It's also nice that we have a lot of the big guys. Absolute is doing a lot of stuff with us this year. Jack Daniels is doing a lot of stuff with us this year. But also we have tasting stations that we organize for the conference as well, that involve smaller, little guys, little distributors, little distilleries, local people, so that if, there are brands, again, because Canada isn't huge, even some global brands have smaller distributors here in Canada, and so they don't have, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to spend on activations all the time during the year. And so with Toronto Cocktail Conference, we wanted to make sure that we had space for those guys too, the people that don't necessarily have a huge marketing budget or a brand ambassador, and make sure that, in some cases, it's the person who distilled the spirit standing at the tasting station telling you about the spirit. Trying to make sure that it's open and everyone gets an opportunity to taste everything.
Which is really cool, because I know that Christine Sismondo and Stephen Beaumont are just about to put out a craft spirit book. Yeah. And I know I'm interviewing those guys while we're at the cocktail conference.
Yeah, they're doing a whole talk about craft spirits across Canada, which is one of those jobs that I'm sure at first, when it was, hey, do you guys want to visit every craft distiller in Canada and write a book about it? They were like, yeah, I can drink for 6 months. And I'm willing to bet that 6 weeks in, they were just like, oh, another distillery. Oh, boy.
Another vodka, another gin. Another vodka, another gin.
But it's also great to have people like Stephen Beaumont and Christine Sismondo, who are such dedicated writers, that they did it. And I'm sure that book is going to be amazing. And honestly, if anyone listening hasn't seen either of them speak before, it's an experience. Both of them are just so entertaining and engaging.
Yeah, it's going to be a super animated seminar, that one.
Mm-hmm.
So before we sort of tie this off, because I like to try and keep them relatively around half an hour, but this is really interesting. What is the one thing you learned from last year? You got last year's conference and organization that you perfected this year?
Take more help. It's, bartending for a million years. And yeah, I mean, in Canada, it's a little different. And even though we do have bar backs, depending on the venue, you get pretty used to doing everything yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Ice machine breaks, you take your shirt off, you climb under the ice machine and figure out what's wrong with it. Last year, the four of us that organized it, we had 4 trash pandas. Our friend Steva Casey came up from Birmingham, Alabama, and she sort of handled registration for us the whole time. And then we had 2 guys from Toronto and 1 guy from Saskatoon sort of running around, help us monitor all the seminars, batching cocktails and all that. So this year, one of the first decisions that we made were that we were going to have 10 trash pandas. Trash pandas, for anyone listening that has maybe been to, like, in Thirst, in Boston for Thirst, they're called scholars. At Tails, it's caps. Everyone sort of has a different, I don't like the word volunteer, but a different group of extra helping hands for the, Team Taco and San Antonio, that kind of thing. So in Toronto, we have trash pandas, which is a reference to our adorable raccoons that will get into everything. Anyway, this year we have 10 trash pandas. So we have extra sets of hands, because last year what happened was Gord and John and Jess and I just ended up running around the Drake Hotel and the Gladstone as well, the hotel down the street that's also hosting some of the seminars. Mm-hmm. There was days where we were putting in 40,000 steps, which for hosting a conference where there's a bunch of seminars about health and wellness in the industry, we really didn't look after ourselves for those 2 days. So this year we got the extra help. So we have a whole team of people from all over Canada coming to help us out, and they get to see seminars. They're going to get a couple special treats as well. But asking for the extra help and knowing when you're at your limit, I think that's something that we took away from the first year of TOCC.
That's amazing. And have you completely sold out now?
Not quite. No, there are still tickets for sale. We added an extra 100 tickets this year.
Wow.
Last year, in our first year, we sold out 10 days beforehand. And it was 300 tickets last year that we sold. And 300 people is a lot of people, but not an insane amount. Again, we want to keep it so that you keep seeing everyone's faces, right? Yeah. This year, though, because we sold out 10 days ahead of time, and we did get a lot of emails, especially in those 10 days, text messages from friends. They're just like, I fucked up. Which is both, like, it's funny and flattering, and also kind of like, yeah, man, you fucked up. You should have bought a ticket. Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. Everything is last minute.
Oh, yeah.
So this year we've expanded a little bit. We have 100 extra tickets for sale this year, so there are still some left. By the time this airs, I don't know. I can't even make a prediction right now. Let's go out on a limb and say there's less than 100 tickets left by the time someone hears this.
Yeah, that would be a good way to be.
Actually, what was it today? I think. Oh, you know what? We have way less than that. I think there's like 80. I don't know. Anyway, there are still tickets for sale. If there's not, go to TorontoCocktailConference.ca, click on tickets and buy them. They are $150 plus all Eventbrite and taxes and all that. But basically, for $150, there are tasting stations, and if you max out your time on everything, you can visit. I did the math earlier today. It works out that you can see 9 seminars and taste something like 23 different spirits and cocktails for $150. And then you're at the Drake Hotel, where there is an entire cocktail menu that Gord and John and I made last week, and that's on offer the whole time. And then there's food there as well. We were talking to some of the bars around the neighborhood just today about different specials they're going to offer throughout TOCC as well. So, yeah, pretty good value, $150 Canadian dollars. Anyone listening in the U.S., that's a 30% discount. Anyone listening from the U.K., it's like a 48% discount. Yeah.
And Singapore, that's what you pay for brunch on a Sunday. So
yeah. Wow. Yeah. I can't imagine. Asia is someplace that Jess and I with Bartender Alice, we haven't really gotten to yet, but it's that one that keeps sort of popping up, and it's like, so when are we going to do an event in Singapore or
you let me know.
Seoul
I go back in 3 weeks' time. Well, 4 weeks' time. Straight after TOCC, I head back like the day after.
Oh wow,
So,
that's exciting.
Yeah, for 8 weeks.
So I got a guy in Singapore, is what you're saying.
You got a guy in Singapore, and with
Great.
I got 3 venues in Singapore to do it at too. So
whoa,
I got
wow.
you covered.
That sounds amazing. Cool. So TOCC quickly coming up. It's exciting. I've been going to spin class a lot to keep my cardio ready.
I've been here in the gym running 4 kilometers a day, so we'll be both set. We'll be both set for TOCC. Okay, buddy. Well, I appreciate this. I was so looking forward to doing this. I'm so glad I got back to Canada to be able to have a chat with you. I know I've got a couple of bartenders coming from Victoria with me, and I know the West Coast is coming out as well. So you'll have a nice West Coast contingent in Toronto as well.
Yeah, Amber Bruce is coming in.
Lovely.
Amber and I never get to spend enough time together, and I'm pretty excited that she's going to be in town for a few days. There's a bunch of people from the West Coast that are coming by. I'm excited. I'm so happy we got to talk about this.
This is going to be awesome. I appreciate this, buddy. I'll see you in like 3.5 weeks, 2.5 weeks.
2.5 weeks, yeah.
2.5 weeks.
All right. We'll talk to you soon, Shawn.
Thanks, Ed. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks, Post Shifters. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you're listening, whatever platform you're on, give me a good rating, subscribe, listen along. I'm going to keep going. I really enjoy sitting down with people and learning where they're from, what they did, and how they got to where they were. So if you love it, give me a good 5 stars. If you don't, give me 1 and I'll try harder.